Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today, Masechtas Menachos daf Yud Aleph. We are going to begin on the very bottom of Yud Amud Beis, the last line. Kamatz v'ol biyado sror or gurgar melach okoyret lavoina pasol. We'll look in the Rashi in a second, but this is a quote directly from our Mishnah from Dav Vav. And it says, when it comes to the Kemitza, if after you do this, because it has to be the complete amount of Kemitza, the amount of flour, and if it turns out that there is a rock or some type of salt or something in which is a foreign substance in the flour offering, it's puzzle. And the reason the Mishnah says, puzzle. If there's more than the amount, then it's not proper, or if it's less than the amount. And the Mishnah concluded, Ve'ezu haiter, what is yoser, what is more? Shekamsu mibaititz. So you're supposed to do the kemitza with your three fingers, but if you have flour which is overflowing from those areas, then that's too much. The chasser shekamsu b'rashetz ba'osav. If a person only uses, let's say, the small part of their fingertips, Rashi says, ma'at shlo pashtu al pas kol hayad. You didn't use the whole hand, but you just the little bit of inside the fingers. That isn't enough, because it has to be an exact amount, which in itself is quite complicated, as we can imagine. So the Rashi above on Yud Aleph Amud Aleph says, Mipnei sha'kaimetz chaser kedei makim hakairit. Because the problem is that you need to have the right amount, and therefore, if you would remove these things, now all of a sudden it's chaser. On this Rashi asks, Im timer ketzad kaimetz v'lo lavoina minchahi dichsev kol halavoina asher al mincha tshuva l'davar kisha kaimetz masayos lavoina kul l'tzad echad v'kaimetz asayos be'emsa sakli. Okay, Ayin Rashi. So, Kol Hani Lamli, why does that give these different examples? Just basically say if it's missing, that's it. So, if the Eitana Soror, if I only mention the case of a rock, Mishum Delabas Hakravihi, can't be Makriv a rock. Level Melach, the Bas Hakravihi, salt is something that is found on the Mizbech, so Ema Tiskasher, maybe it would be okay. The Eitana Melach, Deloi Ikva Bahadi Mincha, Mikara. Has no connection to it has no connection at all to the carbon the mincha at all. She'enu moilech el hakayim zvad el lavaina de ikva bahadi mincha mikara emetiskasha kamashmon. So the lavaina is something which is accompanying the mincha. So therefore, if some of it went into it, maybe that would be okay. It says Rashi lashmeinan lavaina v'koshkin sor v'melech. So just mention lavaina, and that's it. So teretz itan lavaina b'reisha hachinami. Duloma boy lemisni sor b'melch. You wouldn't have to. El hoya b'nakat sor b'reisha tan lavaina b'melch. So it's how does that answer the question? So then just mention lavaina. Okay, Ayin Rashi. Mimnei she'amar hakaimitz hechser or heser pasol. It's got to be the exact amount. So my area mishum. Why do you have to say the problem is because there's a lot or not a lot? Right? When you do the chatzitz, the kamitza, there can't be any intervention between your hand and the flour, and obviously a chatzitza will passel, as the Gemara in Zvachim on Chav Daled says. So therefore, the question is: so why do you even have to say that? It's just a chatzitza. So Amar Yirmiyah minat sad, says Rashi, Lamala eitzel goydel olamata eitzel kamitza. The leika chatzitza the hainu minat sad, that it's on the side. The leacher shekamatz hoipech gav yadai. He turns his hand to the side as part of the kamitza process, and therefore it's possible that it's there, but it's not necessarily a chatzitza. Okay. So how exactly do you do kamitza? We're pretty familiar with this. Kamsi inchi, just like the way that people do kamitza. It's what does that mean? So Rashi says, "Mashma b'chol hetzbois." Seems like you have to use all your hand, all your fingers, all your entire hand, everything. So we know that, of course, that's not the reality. So on this, the Gemara says, 1 second. You're telling me so the Gemara in Ksuvas talks about each finger has a certain name. So this finger, the small pinky finger, is the zeres. Why is that? Because in zu kamitza, and this finger is called zeres because that's a measurement. But this finger, the ring finger, is called the kamitza, right? Zu ama, the middle finger is the ama because that's how you measure an ama. Zu etzba, which has to do with the sprinkling. Actually, Rashi says Zu ama shtei amos hayu b'shush nabira shtei makolei shehin amo. Okay, etzba is to latabel hakayin etzba obadam, that he does the sprinkling with his thumb, his pointer finger, and Zu gaidel, the thumb, l'bahanais the mitzaira, that's where the blood application is put on the thumb. That's why it's called the gaidel. And so alma kamitza b'kaimitz l'bezeres. You do kamitza with this finger, not this small finger. Ella lahashvais. Rather, it just means that it should be used to even it out. In other words, if you have a certain amount of flour, that excess flour, you can move your small little finger to smooth out. So Rashi, im yotza kemach l'matim in a kaimitz moichkai. You're going to erase it or remove mishavi be'etzba katana with your small finger. Shlihe mibayritz v'chein milamawa begaidel. So also this finger as well, because if there's a lot of flour that's protruding outside of these fingers, then it ends up being more than one is allowed to have. So hechi so Rav Zutra bar Tuvia Rav that you should bury your 3 fingers ad shemigia al pas yadai, like you bury it until it reaches the palm of your hand inside the kaimitz, and that's when you do the kamitza. Tani mihachi moli kaimsai. What does that mean? Yachol mibaititz. You would think that you should have it even protruding outward, a lot of flour popping out. Talmud loimer big kaimsai has to be only in the kaimitz, which is mashma only inside, but not anything protruding outward. So iba kaimso yachol burashi etzboi. So maybe in a small amount, even with just your fingers, that's a little bit of your fingers. Talmud loimer moli kumso, it has to be full. So haketzad chayfa shoshes ba'oisav al pas yadu b'kaimitz. You do 3 fingers. But machmas of a marcheshes between these 2 different pans. And Rashi says the maseh nafuya, that the method is that the flour is baked, as Rashi says the liach shehin afuyin, that after it's baked already, paisasan v'kaimitz, you crumble it up and then you do the kamitza. Hilkach I asher. You won't be able to make it so very thin like fine flour because it's already clumpy because it was already baked. It's very possible that when you do the kamitza with the marcheshes and machvas, which is baked, that some of it will protrude outside of your fingers. Certainly, you'll need to remove that so that it doesn't become too much. Okay, again, that's b'machvas, b'marcheshes, moiche b'gadol milmala, b'etzba'u katana milmata. Zuhi avoida kasha sheb'mikdash. When it comes to the kamitza, this is the hardest of all the different forms of avoda, so that you get it exactly right. Can't be a little bit less, can't be a little bit more. It's got to be the right amount. That's not so easy to be able to nail. That is the hardest. Vesula, this is more in Yuma and other places. Is that true? There's no other harder avoda. Vika malika, right? To do the malika, which in Zvachim it talks about that this is an avoda kasha, to be able to take your nail and to be able to kill the bird in exactly the right way. Also, v'ika chanifa. When it comes to, as it's discussed in great detail, the kohen gadol, that he has to, when he brings the spices into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, So different opinions exactly what happens. Here it says that he puts it in Barashi Etzba'osav, by his tips of his finger, Umalo Begoidloi. So, or some people say it's by his chin. He has to have both hands coupled like this so that all of the spices go directly into his hands, and he can't put anything. He's not allowed to put anything down. He's in the Kodesh Kodashim. So some say he puts it like in his teeth, and he has to bend down, and as the shovel of the spices goes into his hands, nothing can drop. That certainly seems to be hard as well. So Gemara says, okay, that's true. Ella he achas mi avodas kasher shebamikdash. Certainly, it's certainly one of the three. Those are the three hardest ones, which is question 5, which is question TB23. Malika, Hanifa, and of course Kamitza are the three hardest things in the Beis Hamikdash. Amar Papa Pshitali, it's simple to me when the pasuk says Molei Kaimsai Kide Kamsi Inchi, boy, that you have to do the Kamitza just as understood as people would, that they will stick the hands to the side, and then that's how they'll scoop it up in that particular fashion. So boy rapapa kaimitz b'roishetz bois of mai. If let's say you use the tips of your fingers, what's the din? Min a stud in mai. Let's say you stick your hand on the side, and that's how you scoop it up. Mimata lamala, from down up, mai teku. So if you divert from any of the different ways in which you're supposed to do it, it's not so clear if it's acceptable. Oimer rapapa b'shitali. Did I do this already? Moli chafnav k'dechamsi inchi. Rapapa chafan barashi etzba'osav mahu min a studin mahu, or chafan bezu v'zu. Let's say each hand separately, uve the carbon zu etzel zu, and it's brought together. Mahu teku. Boy rapapa davke l'kaimitz b'defaneha damana. Let's say the flour gets stuck onto the sides of the keli. My toich kli be'inan, does it have to be inside? V'ika, it's inside. Or dilma hanach b'toich be'inan v'leika teku. Does it actually have to go inside the kli in the land, or is it just sticking on the side enough? Teku. Ba'imar b'ravashi havche lamana. Let's say you flip the kli around. V'davke l'kaimitz bi'arasei damana. And Rashi says, "Gain shohel kli base kibul miachar kumoi shish bakaros." You see, sometimes when it comes to certain plates, if you flip them around, even the bottom part has a little bit of an indentation. So what's the din? Hanacha b'toicha be'inan v'ika. There is a hanacha inside because it's indented. Maybe it has to be the proper way, which is putting it inside and not on the other side of it. So this is also TA20 because it's such a clean question. Elu avodas kashus b'mikdash. So again, that's the exact same thing. That's TA20. Okay, so let's now get into the next Mishnah. Ketzad hu oisa. Exactly how do you do the kamitza? So poishid esets ba'oisa val pas yado. Again, you stick out your fingers from your hand. So riba shamana, if you put too much oil, if you took too much oil, or chaser shamana, or you took a little bit too little oil, chiser lavaina sa psula, or not enough frankincense, it'll be puzzle. It's got to be the exact right amount. And the pasuk says that a mincha is lug shemen, so it can't be any less. As well as when it comes to lavaina, it says to shear lavaina mole hakaimitz. And Rashi says v'ikasha lisni ribu lavainasa hamafarish of Gemara. So it's interesting; it doesn't have the same flow. When it comes to the oil, it says more or less. But when it comes to lavainasa, it only says if there's less. Why doesn't it mention if you have too much of it? Okay. So Gemara, hey chidami. Riva Shemana. What does that mean that you have too much oil? So Rabbi Eliezer Kagayin Shehifresh Shnei Lugin. That you're mafresh 2 lugin of oil, and there should have only been 1. But since you're mafresh 2 l'shem mincha, so that's possible. Lukma Kagayin the Arev b'Shemen the Chulin b'Shemen the Chaverta. Why doesn't it just give a different example that there you have 1 lug of proper oil and the other lug of chulin mixed together? Maybe this mixture will not possible. So when it comes to a minchas chayte, which we know does not have oil, the pasul b'shemen, it becomes pasul with its oil. Hechem shkachasla. If it's the chul, if it's the oil which is for hektish, there is none because it's not put in there, as we saw already. In, we're going to see actually later on. Daf nun tes lo yosim el shemen v'im some pasul. If you put into the minchas chayte oil, then it's pasul. So either chulin or the chaverta. Let's say it's chulin and it's mixed up. Hamarta lo pasul. We said it doesn't possible. So Rabbi Eliezer if you have a lug of chulin and its counterpart, in that case, obviously the pasul, because you have chulin in there. Let's say we're talking about a situation you have 2 lugin that you were mafresh. The truth is, each one on its own should be fit. So Amr Lissel, the fact that they're together shouldn't passel it. Kamash one. So Manole, how do it's a problem? Manole Rabbi Eliezer ha. So Marava Masnisin Kashisa, because our mission is difficult to understand otherwise. My area, the Tani, what does our mission say? Riva Shemana, that there is an increase of its oil. Listening Riva la Shemen. Now Hakamash when the Afghan the Hifresh la Shnei Lugin, even though it was of sanctity, nonetheless, because of that language, Riva Shemana, so it's oil, so therefore it demonstrates that it is talking about 2 lugin of that which was sanctified. Chisul Vainasa, so Tanobanim. Chasra, let's say it's missing V'amda al kairit echad, and it's standing by this one kairit, this a little bit of levina, psula. Al shnei karatin ksher, divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda holds that even though it's not necessarily the measurement of the levina, but the reality is that if it's missing, but it's just a little bit of levina left, like 2 karatim, 2 measurements of levina, that would be enough for it to still be kosher. Okay. However, if Shimon Omer al karet echek share pachas mekan psula, actually only need is 1. You don't need to have 2. 1 alone would be enough. Okay. As we continue to Yud Al Hamid Bey, so the machlokes is 1 enough, having 1 left. Well, Sanya, but we learn Rav Shimon Omer kaimitz, and some people remove the vav. Kaimitz ulavayna shechaser koshu pasul. It says even koshahu, right? Even the smallest amount. So tani karet lavayna shechaser koshu pasul. You're right. Only we're talking about the lavayna that's missing the small amount as pasul. V'yiboy saying kan b'lavayna haba im hamincha kan b'lavayna haba b'fni atzma. There's a difference between the levina which comes together with the mincha offering. If it's missing anything at the time of the hakdaira, it's still kosher, because as we're going to see, it says mikoil halavana. It says mikol asher mincha, from any of it. V'haidik tani chaser koshu pasal. It says if you're missing even the smallest amount, that's if it comes by itself. If you just say I'm giving levina alone, then it has to be the right amount. So if he only is bringing the levina by itself, that must be complete. And if he's missing any of it, it's possible. Mashain Kain, if it's accompanying a mincha, then we're more lenient about the measurement of the levina if it has either 1 or 2 kairit l'sholavain is enough. Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Yosef and Rabbi Yochanan Gimel machlokas b'davar. It's actually a three-way machlokas. The Meir Savar kaimitz b'tchila v'kaimitz b'saif. Basically, what that means is Rashi says b'shas kmitza be'inan shehi b'kli moli kaimitz l'vaina. That the beginning has to be perfect and it has to be that way throughout. Behuda Savar no kaimitz b'tchila. It's true at the beginning you want to make sure it's perfect. However, v'shnei kratim b'saif. As long as you have even a little bit left at the end, that is enough. Rav Shimon Savar kaimitz b'tchila. Yes, it has to start off right. But however, b'karit echad b'saif. Even if you have just one left, not two left, the shlosh nemikar echad darshu. The pasuk says, "As kol halavanu asher al minchas Rameir Savar adi isa l'lavaina deikva b'hadi mincha mikara." It's gonna be the exact same way as it was originally, and therefore can't be missing anything at any point. Yehuda Savar kol. When it says kol, means if you feel chad kairit, it's mashma even one. Then it says es, there's a rabbis kairit acher, which means that you need to at least have two. If you have Shimon, es will darish, and therefore only need is one. So the machlokas is you darish and es. Rav Yitzchak, Rav Yosef, Rav Yochanan machlokas will avayna haba ilma mincha. The whole machlokas is if it comes together with a mincha. Here, since you're doing it by itself, as we mentioned before, we're more strict, and therefore, if you said again hariyalai lavaina, so then you have to be mafresh the entirety, the whole thing, the proper share at the beginning, and it has to remain that way. Asher al hamincha. That's why the pasuk says that the lavaina is brought al hamincha, together with the flour offering, which is mashma. The whole machlokas is when they're together. To bahadi mincha in b'fnei atzma loy, because b'fnei atzma there everyone agrees it has to be done in its entirety. Mitchil v'yad seif. Actually, the whole the machlokas is all again of what's accompanying it. But not that if it comes by itself. If you're dealing with a lavaina which comes with the bezichin, which is a spoonful by the lechem apanim, specifically, if we're talking about the lechem apanim, then diver kol shnei kamatzim b'tchila v'shnei kamatzim b'soif. That I have to have two kamatzim at the beginning and two at the end. So pshita ma'od tema kivan the bahadi lechem asya. Since it's coming together with a lechem, kasher al mincha damya. So it should be kasher al mincha damya. It should have the same din as the mincha kamashmulan. In other words, it's possible that just like there's a machlokus when it comes to it, the lavaina coming together with the mincha, there's a machlokus how much lavaina you need. Maybe not the whole thing, right? Maybe one or two left. So you would think maybe it's the same thing by the lechem apanim, because it's not by itself, it's together with the lechem apanim, so therefore it doesn't have to be the whole thing. Kamashmon, it still has to be the lechem apanim. You have to have the entirety of the bezichin. The spoonfuls by the lechem apanim have to be exact. Two kamasim at the beginning and two at the end. So Pligabar Rav Ami of Rav Yitzchak Naf, actually is machlokas. Chadom machlokas b'lavaina haba ima mincha, as we said. B'lavaina haba b'fnei atzma divrei hagol kaimitz b'tchila v'kaimitz b'saif. When it comes to, if you again say hariyalai oil, it's got hariyalai lavaina. That's got to be the whole amount. The chadom k'machlokas b'zu k'achamos b'zu. Now the machlokas is even when it comes to b'fnei atzma. Is also machlokas, which perhaps also can mean by the lechem apanim. Chis lavaina sa psul. So hayeser ksher. So this again is a shtickle manna, because our Mishnah said when it came to the shemen, more or less is possible. When it mentions by the lavaina, it only says if there's less, but if you have more, it seems to be okay, right? Hayeter ksher of asani yisub psula. So how do you reconcile this? I know the Mishnah doesn't mention it, but maybe it should. So Rami Bar Chama Kagain Shehifresh Lo Shnei Kamatzim. We're talking about where a person was mafresh two kamatzim, which is possible because that certainly is more than you were supposed to do. And that's what it's talking about. That more is possible because you were mafresh two. You did two kamatzim. You're only supposed to do one. If you're mafresh two, and maybe you did it like achrayas, in case you would lose one, kaidem kemitza, and you did it before the kemitza at all, lo hukva. Right, so therefore, if it was done, got lost or something like that, so then it will be kosher. However, acher kemitza, once it got lost afterwards, hukva. And therefore, because of that, it's considered to be like extra, and it's puzzle. In other words, the point is it had to have been lost before the kamitza. It was done already after the kamitza, then that's already too much. Let's say you're mafresh 4 kamatzim l'shnei bazichin. The avdu shnai mehen, you lost 2 kaidim siluk bazichin. So lo hukvu, it's not invalidated, because again it was before the removal of the spoonfuls of frankincense. However, l'achar siluk bazichin hukva, and therefore it becomes problematic. So hasul amali hainu hach. The fact is, it seems like we're comparing the bazichin of the lechem upon him to our case. So why do you have to mention it? So manatema kivan dibar kaimitz dida kivan shegiz man laparka kaman deprika dami kamashmalon. Since it's very clear, so once it reaches the time to remove the spoonfuls, so you would think it's already like it's separated even before it's separated, and therefore it's already problematic, even though you didn't do the siluk bazikin. It doesn't matter, kamash malon, that since you did not yet do the siluk, it's still fine. It's not going to invalidate it. Okay. All right, we're going to stop there. Maybe another question. Nope. Let's look at question 6. This is a great question. This is what we just did. Okay? So let's get this down. Yud Aleph Amud Beis. And if it's right? So this is question 6. And we had this when it comes to Lavaina Haba together with the mincha. So we said shalosh machloikas b'davar. So according to Rameir, he holds it's got to be the whole thing. Rabbi Yehuda says just as long as you have kaimetz b'tchil v'shnei karatim b'sayif, even 2. However, and Rav Shimon holds that you actually have to have kair echa, even just kair echa b'sayif. So it's the question is 1 or 2. That's the machlokas. All right, just look at question 6 to see how it says it. Rameir psula, Rav Shimon ksheira, v'nishtayir kol shehu, have to have even 1. Rav Yehuda kol sheshtar beis kuratim kasher, you just have to have 2. Adkan.